The sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the endless plains in shades of gold and crimson. The wind whispered across the tall prairie grasses, carrying with it the scent of dust, wildflowers, and the faint tang of horse sweat. In the small town of Redridge, a place where wooden storefronts creaked and the saloon's piano rattled in the evening breeze, life was simple, though often harsh. Amelia Hart had grown up here, a daughter of the land, tending her father's ranch while dreaming of adventures that stretched far beyond the horizon. With her long chestnut hair pulled into a practical braid, dust-streaked boots, and a stubborn set to her jaw, she was the kind of woman who could handle a horse, a herd, and the whispers of small-town gossip all at once. But lately, her dreams had become haunted, not by nightmares, but by visions of a man she'd never met. A man with storm-gray eyes, a calm smile, and a presence that seemed to cut through the dull monotony of her days. She shook her head, brushing away the thought as she tended the horses near the corral. Dreams were just that, dreams. They had no bearing on reality, and yet, a certain restlessness had been growing in her chest, an impatience she couldn't shake. It was on the third day of a relentless, sun-scorched week that he appeared. Dust rolled behind him like a cloak, and the clop of his horse's hooves echoed through the empty streets as he approached. His boots kicked up clouds of red dirt, and his wide-brimmed hat shaded eyes that were exactly as she'd seen them in her dreams. "Evening, ma'am," he called, his voice deep, calm, and carrying the ease of someone who had wandered these plains long enough to know its secrets. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She gripped the fence post, steadying herself. Her mind spun, who was this stranger, and why did her pulse race as if he were some missing piece she'd longed for but never known? "I'm Amelia," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're far from anywhere you belong, stranger." He tipped his hat with a slight grin. "Name's Elias Kane. And I reckon the plains have been calling me all my life. Seems like they finally led me here." There was something familiar in the way he spoke, a resonance that tugged at a memory she didn't quite have, a memory that felt like it belonged to another life, another time. She found herself studying him, the way his coat hung loosely over broad shoulders, the way his fingers tapped a silent rhythm on the reins. The townsfolk had begun to gather near the saloon when whispers of the newcomer spread, but Amelia didn't notice them. She was lost in the gravity of his gaze. A strange certainty settled over her. The dreams, the visions, the restless longing, it had all been leading to this moment. "You're the man from my dreams," she whispered before she could stop herself, her voice trembling as if she had spoken a sacred truth aloud. "And by the sacred law, our fates are bound. You are my husband." Elias blinked, startled, his usual calm expression faltering. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, one of recognition, of relief, and of something deeper that neither of them yet had words for. "I've been searching for you, Amelia," he said softly. "I didn't know it, but I've been searching my whole life." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and sagebrush across the plains, and the world seemed to pause. Horses whinnied, the town fell silent, and the sky blazed with color as if celebrating the union of two souls who had wandered separately but were now unmistakably bound together. Amelia's heart leaped. She had imagined this meeting 1,000 times, yet reality surpassed even her dreams. The stranger who had appeared on the dusty trail was no longer just a vision. He was real, and he was hers. But as the sun disappeared behind the distant hills, casting the town in long shadows, both of them knew that the law of the land, the law of hearts, and the dangers of the untamed frontier would not make this easy. For every sunrise that promised hope, the night held secrets, threats, and choices that could tear them apart. Yet, as Elias dismounted and offered his hand, the world felt right, for in that moment, amidst the dust, the heat, and the endless horizon, destiny had finally led them together. And Amelia, for the first time, believed in the power of dreams, in sacred laws, and in a love as wild and enduring as the West itself. The morning sun crested the hills like molten gold, casting long shadows over Redridge. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, and the faint aroma of fresh coffee drifted from the saloon. Amelia had spent a restless night thinking about Elias, the way he'd smiled, the calm certainty in his gray eyes, and the strange, unspoken connection that had drawn them together before they'd even spoken a word. Elias, on the other hand, had not slept at all. Memories he had long buried clawed their way back to the surface, memories of a childhood steeped in frontier lore, of sacred promises passed from generation to generation, of a law older than any town sheriff. The sacred law, as Amelia had so boldly declared, was no trivial matter. It was a binding of souls, a covenant older than the hills themselves. and it carried weight in ways most folk in Redridge would never understand. He stepped out of the small inn where he had taken refuge, brushing the dust from his coat, and made his way toward the stables. Amelia was already there, brushing a chestnut mare, the sunlight catching her braid and making it shimmer like spun gold. "Morning, Amelia," he said, tipping his hat. His voice carried an edge of seriousness today, a gravity that made her pause mid-stroke. "Morning," she replied, trying to mask the flutter in her chest. "Sleep well." "Not a wink," he admitted, tying his horse to the post. "I've been thinking about the law you spoke of last night." Amelia's eyes widened. You know about it." "I know enough," he said, glancing toward the distant ridges. "Enough to know it's real. Enough to know that when you called me your husband, it wasn't just words. That law, it chooses, Amelia, and it doesn't often give second chances." Her heart pounded in her chest. "So it really means what I said?" "Yes," Elias said softly, stepping closer. "It binds us, but it also brings responsibility. There are things you don't know, dangers you can't yet see. Out here, in the untamed lands, the law is more than just promises. It's survival, it's honor, and it can test a love like ours in ways we can't imagine." Amelia swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had dreamed of love, of destiny, of a man who felt like he belonged to her before they'd even met, but the frontier was unforgiving. She had seen it herself, ranch hands fall to fever, travelers vanish on lonely trails, and families torn apart by bandits or debt. "Whatever it is, Elias," she said, determination flashing in her eyes, "we face it together. Sacred law or not, I choose you." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "That's why I knew I had to find you," he murmured. "Even before I understood what this law demanded, I knew you were the one I had been searching for." Their moment was interrupted by the rattling of spurs and the clatter of hooves. Sheriff Callahan, a stout man with a perpetually furrowed brow, trotted into town on his horse, concern etched deep into his face. "Miss Hart." "Stranger," he called, his voice carrying through the morning air. "Got word of a gang riding through the canyon east of Redridge. Dangerous bunch. Could be heading this way." Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. The dangers of frontier life weren't distant stories. They were real, and they were coming for them. Ilias's hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally, grounding her in the moment. "We'll be ready," he said firmly, his jaw set. "I've ridden with men far worse than this gang. If they come for Redridge, they'll find more than they bargained for." As the townsfolk began to stir, preparing for the inevitable, Amelia and Elias walked side by side through the dusty streets. Their steps were in sync, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. This was not just a meeting of hearts but a union forged by destiny, by dreams, and by a law older than the hills. That night, under a canopy of stars, Elias told Amelia about the sacred law in detail, a binding that chose partners by the resonance of their souls, a law that demanded loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. It had brought him here, to her, and it would demand that they prove themselves worthy of its covenant. Amelia listened, her head resting against his shoulder, feeling the strength in his arms and the certainty in his voice. The law was not just a promise, it was a challenge. And the West, with its wild plains, its hidden dangers, and its untamed hearts, would test them every step of the way. But in that quiet night, beneath the vast, starlit sky, Amelia knew one thing for certain. No matter the trials, no matter the perils, she would follow him anywhere. For the man she had seen in her dreams was no longer a phantom of sleep. He was real. He was here, and together, they would face whatever the frontier dared to throw at them. This sets up the tension of frontier danger, deepens their bond, and begins to explore the mysterious sacred law. The first light of dawn broke over Redridge like a promise, though the air carried a tension heavier than the morning mist. Amelia rose early, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the lasso she kept near her bed. Sleep had been elusive, her dreams haunted not by visions of Elias this time, but by shadows, a gang of outlaws rumored to be riding through the eastern canyon, their intentions unknown but certainly dangerous. Ilias was already awake, feeding his horse with a steady hand, his face unreadable in the early light. The events of the previous evening had left an impression on him. He knew that the law binding him to Amelia was not just spiritual or emotional, it demanded courage in the face of danger, and the West rarely delivered challenges in small doses. "Morning," Amelia said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Morning," Elias replied, his voice calm, but his eyes scanning the horizon as if he could read the future in the shape of the hills. "They'll be here by sundown, I reckon." We've got hours to prepare." Amelia felt a flutter of fear, but also excitement. This was the life she had always imagined in her daydreams. The thrill, the danger, and the unshakable bond with a man who was meant to stand beside her. But now it was real, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. They worked quickly, reinforcing the barn doors and checking the horses. Elias moved with the confidence of a man who had faced outlaws and wildstorms alike. While Amelia followed his lead, her hands steady, her heart racing. Every glance exchanged between them carried unspoken promises. The sacred law that bound them was a blessing, but it was also a call to action. By midday, the town's residents had begun to take precautions. Windows were shuttered, doors bolted, and the sheriff organized a small posse to patrol the surrounding hills. The air was tense, each sound amplified. The clatter of a loose board, the distant crow of a rooster, the faint whisper of wind over the prairie. Elias stood on the ridge outside town, surveying the landscape with sharp eyes. Amelia joined him, her hand brushing his as she leaned against his side. "Do you think they'll come?" she asked, her voice barely above the wind. "They will," he said, his jaw tight. "Outlaws like this don't pass up a chance at easy prey. But we're not easy, and we're not alone." As the sun dipped low, the shadows lengthened across the plains. A faint cloud of dust appeared on the eastern horizon, growing steadily as the gang approached. Horses thundered, the sound rolling across the hills like distant cannon fire. Amelia gripped Elias's arm, feeling the strength in his grip, the steady heartbeat beneath his coat. When the gang entered Redridge, the town fell silent. The outlaws were a rough, ragged bunch, faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats, guns glinting in the fading sunlight. But Elias did not flinch. He moved forward, his hand resting lightly on the butt of his revolver. His eyes locked on their leader, a man known in whispers as Blackthorn, a name that carried fear in every saloon from Redridge to the next county line. "You got no business here," Elias called, his voice carrying across the dusty street. "Turn around and leave, and no one gets hurt." Blackthorn's laugh was low and cruel, echoing against the wooden storefronts. "We heard there was a pretty little lady in town claiming some stranger as her husband," he sneered, nodding toward Amelia. "Thought we'd come see if the law of love protects fools, too stubborn to live." Amelia's blood ran cold, but she did not move. She stood beside Elias, her hands slipping into his, a silent declaration of unity. The sacred law that bound them demanded courage, and she felt it coursing through her veins. The standoff stretched on, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, without warning, Blackthorn signaled his men. Guns were drawn, the flash of metal catching the last rays of sun. Elias acted first, moving with precise, practiced motion, drawing his revolver and firing a warning shot that sent a cloud of dust into the gang's midst. "Back off," he shouted. "You're in Redridge now." Amelia, feeling a surge of fear and exhilaration, drew her own revolver from the holster her father had gifted her years ago. She had never fired it in anger, but the law of destiny, the sacred law, had prepared her for this moment. Her hands were steady, her breath controlled, and as the first outlaw charged, she aimed true. The next hour blurred into a whirlwind of smoke, gunfire, and shouting. Elias moved with lethal precision, covering Amelia when she faltered, guiding her through the chaos with the unspoken rhythm of trust and instinct. Together, they were a force, a man and woman bound, not just by law, but by the unshakable certainty of shared fate. By nightfall, the gang had been driven out, retreating across the plains with curses and threats. Redridge was battered but intact, and the townsfolk emerged from their hiding places, murmuring praises for the courage of the young couple. Amelia, her hands shaking but her eyes shining, leaned against Elias. We did it," she whispered. He wrapped an arm around her, his voice low and steady. "Yes, we did. And this is only the beginning. Out here, the West will keep testing us. But as long as we face it together, there's nothing we can't survive." That night, beneath the vast sky dotted with stars, Amelia and Elias understood something vital. The sacred law that bound them was more than a promise. It was a strength, a shield, and a challenge, all at once. And in the heart of the untamed West, they had found not only love but a courage they had never known they possessed. The morning after the skirmish, Redridge seemed quieter, almost peaceful, though the tension from the previous day still lingered like a shadow. Amelia moved carefully through the town, helping neighbors repair shutters, gather supplies, and tend to minor injuries. The town had survived, but everyone knew the danger was far from over. The West had a way of testing even the bravest souls, and the sacred law that bound Amelia and Elias was only beginning to reveal its depth. Meanwhile, had ridden out before dawn to scout the surrounding plains. He knew Blackthorn's gang would not give up so easily. The outlaw leader had been humiliated, and pride in men like him was often deadlier than greed. Elias returned with grim news. The gang was regrouping, and this time they would come prepared. Possibly with reinforcements. Amelia met him at the corral, brushing the dust from his coat. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice steady despite the concern in her eyes. "They'll be back," Elias said simply. "Stronger, and angrier, but we have something they don't, each other. That sacred law binding us isn't just words. It's a protection, a guide, and a warning." Amelia tilted her head. "A warning?" Elias nodded, pulling her close. "The law demands more than love. It demands sacrifice, courage, and truth. And it will test us in ways we don't yet understand." Amelia shivered, not from fear but from the gravity of his words. She had felt the pull of destiny the moment they met, and now it was clear that their journey would not be easy. But she had chosen Elias, and she would face whatever trials came, bound by law, heart, and soul. That evening, under the pale light of a waxing moon, Elias led Amelia to a hidden canyon, a place known only to a few in the region. The walls of the canyon were etched with symbols, ancient carvings that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Elias knelt before them, brushing dust from the markings. "These," he said, voice reverent, "are the signs of the sacred law. Each mark tells a story, a pact, a promise kept. Our union is not just a bond of hearts, it is a continuation of a tradition older than any town in this valley." Amelia ran her fingers along the carvings, feeling a warmth that seemed to flow through her veins. "So, when I called you my husband," she whispered, "it wasn't just words." "No," Elias said, lifting her hand to his lips. "It was the law recognizing what my heart already knew. It chose you, as it chose me, but with that choice comes responsibility." Before she could respond, a rustle of movement drew their attention. From the shadows emerged a figure draped in a dark coat, hat pulled low over his eyes. Blackthorn. He had returned, and this time, he had not come alone. "You thought you could defy me," Blackthorn growled, his voice a low threat. "Thought a boy and a girl could stand against me and live?" Elias stepped forward, hand on his revolver. "We aren't just a boy and a girl, we're bound by a law older than you. And out here, in this canyon, that law is stronger than your threats." Blackthorn laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. "We'll see about that." Amelia, heart pounding, realized the true meaning of the sacred law. It was not just a promise of love, it was a shield against evil, a guide through danger, and a force that demanded courage beyond the ordinary. She drew her revolver, standing beside Elias with unwavering resolve. The confrontation was tense. A dance of shadows and whispered threats, but amid the fear and danger, Amelia and Elias felt the bond of the sacred law strengthen between them. It was as if the very canyon recognized their unity, lending them strength, focus, and clarity. In a sudden move, Elias disarmed one of Blackthorn's men, while Amelia used the terrain to her advantage, positioning herself with precision. The gang was skilled, but they underestimated the bond between two souls chosen by destiny. Finally, with a decisive action that left Blackthorn's gang scattered and defeated, the canyon fell silent. Moonlight bathed the carvings on the walls, as if celebrating the couple's victory. Amelia turned to Elias, her eyes shining. "The law, it protected us," she whispered. "Yes," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And it will continue to guide us, as long as we remain true to it, and to each other." As they rode back to Redridge under the star-studded sky, the danger behind them, and the promise of the sacred law before them, Amelia understood something profound. Love in the West was not just about hearts and dreams. It was about courage, sacrifice, and the unwavering bond that could withstand even the harshest trials. And together, bound by law and destiny, they were unstoppable. The town of Redridge awoke to a fragile calm. Birds chirped timidly from the wind-blown trees, and the sun shimmered off the weathered rooftops as if nothing had happened. Yet beneath the surface, tension lingered, like a hidden river flowing under the dry earth. Amelia and Elias rode back slowly, surveying the town, knowing that their recent victory against Blackthorn's gang had earned them respect, but also the ire of enemies yet unseen. Amelia dismounted at the corral, brushing the dust from her skirt. She could feel the adrenaline from the previous night's battle still coursing through her veins. It had been her first real confrontation with death, and somehow, surviving it had only strengthened the bond between her and Elias. The sacred law was more than words. Noet was a living force, protective and demanding, and she had begun to understand its weight. Elias joined her, tying his horse to the post. His eyes, storm gray as ever, scanned the horizon. "We've bought time," he said quietly, "but not safety. That gang, they'll return, and they won't come alone next time." Amelia nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand, but whatever comes, we face it together. That's what the law demands, right?" "Yes," he murmured, "together, in heart, in mind, in every choice. But there's something else you need to know." She looked up at him, curiosity and a trace of fear in her gaze. "What is it?" He took her hand, his grip firm, grounding her in a world that was spinning with danger and destiny. "The sacred law isn't just a bond between two people. It's a history, a lineage. I didn't tell you everything last night because I wasn't sure you were ready. But now you need to know. My family, my ancestors were guardians of this law. They protected it, enforced it, and paid a price for it. And now that it has chosen us, the law expects the same." Amelia's heart raced. "Price. Yes," he said, looking distant for a moment. "Sacrifice. Sometimes it demands physical courage. Sometimes emotional endurance. Sometimes it requires facing secrets that the heart wishes to bury. And those secrets can haunt you?" The weight of his words hung between them. Amelia felt both fear and determination rise within her. If the law had chosen them, they would honor it, no matter the cost. "Then we'll face it," she said firmly. "Together." Elias smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Together," he echoed. Their moment was interrupted by the sudden arrival of the town sheriff, a man known for his gruff demeanor but steady hand. "Amelia, Elias, you need to come quickly. There's someone at the edge of town. Claims to know you, both of you." Curiosity and apprehension mingled in Amelia's chest as they followed the sheriff. At the edge of Redridge, by the cracked wooden fence near the hills, stood a figure draped in a tattered cloak. The face was shadowed, but something familiar in the posture sent a chill down Amelia's spine. I knew you'd come," the figure said, voice trembling with age and emotion. "I've been waiting for both of you." Elias stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" The figure pulled back the hood, revealing a face lined with time and sorrow, a woman with eyes like faded embers. A face Amelia would have sworn she had seen before. "I am your aunt, or rather, the closest living remnant of the line that first bound you both by the sacred law," the woman said, her voice trembling. "You've awakened it, and now, you must understand the past if you are to survive the future." Amelia's mind spun. "The past. Yes," the woman said. "The law has always chosen couples like you. Couples who can withstand the trials of the West, who can wield courage and heart alike. But others have failed. And the ghosts of those failures linger, hunting the descendants. Blackthorn's gang isn't the only danger. There are debts owed, promises broken, and enemies from long ago who will not rest." Ilias's hand tightened around hers. "We'll face them," he said, jaw set. "Whatever comes." The woman nodded, relief mingling with concern in her gaze. "Then you must learn quickly. The law is not just a guide, it is a responsibility, and there is much to teach before the next test arrives." As the sun dipped low in the west, casting long shadows across the prairie, Amelia realized that their fight was far from over. The sacred law had chosen them, yes, but now it demanded knowledge, courage, and an unbreakable trust. They were not just lovers, they were guardians, bound by destiny and duty. And somewhere, in the shadowed hills, enemies stirred, waiting for the moment when the law's power might falter, and when love alone would not be enough to save them. Amelia and Elias rode back into Redridge that evening, the wind carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. The town slept uneasily, unaware that its fate and that of the couple it had come to admire was tied to an ancient covenant, a law older than the prairie itself. And for the first time, Amelia understood what it truly meant to be chosen, to be bound, and to love under a law that was as demanding as it was sacred. The morning sun burned through the thin mist that clung to Redridge, illuminating a town that seemed almost untouched by the chaos of the past weeks. But beneath the surface, tension simmered, unseen but palpable. Amelia and Elias rode slowly along the dusty main street, their horses' hooves echoing against the wooden boards. The calm was deceptive. Elias could feel it in his bones. Danger, like a predator, always circled the unsuspecting. Amelia noticed the shadow in his eyes. "What is it?" she asked softly, her hand brushing against his as they rode side by side. "Blackthorn isn't the only one after us," Elias said, voice low. "There are others, shadows from the past who remember the law, who know its power, and who would kill to control it. We need to be careful who we trust." Amelia swallowed, the weight of his words settling on her shoulders. She had always known the West was dangerous, but now danger seemed to seep into every corner of her life. Yet there was a strange clarity in it, as well the sacred law that bound them demanded courage, and her courage had never felt more alive. By midday, they arrived at the outskirts of Redridge, where the canyon twisted like a ribbon of shadow and stone. It was a place Elias had called sacred the night before, and Amelia had felt it resonate with a strange, otherworldly energy. But today, the canyon seemed alive in a darker way. Whispers of movement drifted from the rock walls, and the air smelled faintly of smoke. A lone figure emerged from the shadows, a young man, barely older than Amelia, with a rugged face marked by sun and wind. He tipped his hat, though his eyes darted nervously between them. "Elias Gray?" he asked, voice uncertain. "I've been sent by someone who says they know you." By the law itself. Elias's hand went to his revolver, though he did not draw it. "Who sent you?" The man hesitated. "Aunt Leora. She says you're in danger, and that the law requires you to make a choice. But you must trust me." Amelia frowned. "We've just learned the law has tests. Is this one of them?" "It could be," the young man admitted. "But you have no time to hesitate. Blackthorn's gang isn't acting alone. They're part of a larger web, and someone in town, someone close, has been feeding them information." Amelia's stomach churned. The law demanded unity and trust, yet here was a hint of betrayal, perhaps from someone they considered an ally. Her mind raced through every face in Redridge, wondering who could be capable of such treachery. Elias's jaw tightened. "Then we find the traitor first, before they find us. The law protects us, yes, but it also demands wisdom and vigilance, and trust. Trust must be earned, not given blindly." The young man nodded and led them deeper into the canyon, where the walls seemed to hum with an energy that made the hair on Amelia's arms stand on end. They came to a clearing where the sun slanted through the rocks in golden beams, illuminating carvings she hadn't noticed before, symbols, words, and figures that seemed to tell a story older than Redridge itself. "This is the true heart of the law," the young man explained. "It has been recorded here for generations. And now, you must make a choice. The law requires that couples it binds must prove their loyalty not just to each other, but to the covenant itself. One of you must confront a personal fear, alone. Only then will the law grant you the clarity and strength to face the threats ahead." Amelia felt a shiver of fear. Alone, Elias would not be there. Her heart ached at the thought, yet a strange sense of inevitability took hold. She had to face this. If she faltered, the consequences could be devastating. Not just for her, but for them both. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm, though trembling slightly. "Whatever it is, I'll face it. The law, our bond, it gives me courage." Elias reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "You won't be alone in spirit," he said, voice low. "Remember, the sacred law connects us. Even in the darkest moments, even in isolation, it will guide you, and I will be here when you return. Whatever you face, we face together." Amelia took a deep breath and stepped forward into the shadowed passage the young man indicated. The canyon walls seemed to close in as she moved, the sunlight fading behind her. Fear gnawed at her, a predator circling closer with each step. She saw visions of past failures, whispered doubts, and echoes of danger from her dreams. But then she felt the law, pulsing like a heartbeat in her chest, steady and warm. With every step, the fear diminished, replaced by clarity and resolve. She confronted the memories, the shadows, the specters of doubt, speaking to them aloud, claiming her courage and her bond with Elias as her shield. And when she reached the heart of the canyon, a light seemed to rise from the carvings themselves, bathing her in a golden glow that made her knees weak with awe. When she emerged, the young man was waiting, eyes wide with respect. "You've passed," he said softly. "The law has recognized your strength. Whatever comes next, you will face it together, stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever." Elias ran to her, lifting her into his arms, relief and pride shining in his eyes. "You did it," he whispered. "I never doubted you for a second." Amelia laughed softly, a sound full of triumph and relief. "Neither did the law," she said. And in that moment, standing together in the fading light of the canyon, she knew that nothing, neither shadow, nor betrayal, nor danger could break the bond between them. The West awaited, vast and untamed, but they were ready. The law had tested them, and their love had survived. And in the quiet, Amelia realized that the greatest trials were not of gunfire or outlaws, but of heart and trust, and that they had just begun to prove themselves. Redridge was tense that morning, a town bracing for the storm it knew was coming. The dust hung thick in the streets, stirred by the restless wind that seemed to carry whispers of danger. Amelia and Elias stood side by side, surveying the horizon. After the trials of the canyon, after the tests of trust, they were no longer just lovers, they were partners, bound not only by heart but by the sacred law itself. Elias tightened his grip on his revolver. Blackthorn will strike soon, he said, scanning the hills, but this time, we're ready. The law has shown us the path, and we won't falter. Amelia nodded, adjusting the strap of her satchel, which contained the sacred carvings they had uncovered. We've faced fear, betrayal, and shadows of the past. Whatever comes next, we face it together, as the law demands. As if on cue, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Blackthorn's gang was returning, larger and angrier than before, but behind them, a contingent of townsfolk, inspired by Amelia and Elias's courage, had gathered farmers, ranchers, and even the sheriff's deputies ready to defend their home. The two sides faced each other across the prairie, tension crackling in the dry air. Blackthorn, mounted on a black stallion, sneered at Elias. Thought you could hide behind your love-in-law, he shouted. This ends today. Elias stepped forward, his voice carrying across the plain. It ends when justice is served. But remember, this love and courage are stronger than fear and greed, and the law protects those who are true to it. Amelia's eyes met Elias's, the bond between them glowing with an unspoken promise. The sacred law had guided them, tested them, and forged them into a force neither Blackthorn nor his gang could break. The battle began with a thunder of hooves, the crack of revolvers, and the shouts of men and women who refused to be cowed. Amelia moved with a precision she hadn't known she possessed, taking cover behind rocks and dispatching threats with calm focus. Elias fought alongside her, his movements fluid, protective, and deadly. Together, they were unstoppable, a dance of fate and skill, bound by law and heart. At the heart of the fight, Blackthorn lunged toward Amelia, revolver raised, but Elias intercepted him, forcing him to stumble back. Amelia took advantage of the opening, disarming the outlaw with a swift, precise move. Blackthorn fell to his knees, eyes wide with disbelief. You can't be defeated? He spat. Elias's gaze was steady. The law has chosen us. Our bond is stronger than your hatred. Amelia stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. And love, true love, is a force you'll never understand. Blackthorn's gang, seeing their leader bested and their plans unraveling, began to retreat, leaving Redridge in peace, for now. The townsfolk cheered, surrounding Amelia and Elias with gratitude and admiration, but the couple knew their victory was more than physical, it was spiritual, a triumph of heart, courage, and destiny. As the dust settled, Elias took Amelia's hand, lifting it to his lips. We survived everything the West threw at us, he said softly, and the law, it has guided us every step. Amelia smiled, feeling a warmth that went deeper than the sun on her face. We faced the law, fear, betrayal, and we came through stronger. Together. At that moment, Aunt Leora appeared, her eyes shining with pride. The law has recognized your strength, she said, but more than that, it honors your love. Few are chosen, and fewer still survive the trials intact. You are the continuation of a lineage older than this land, a bond that cannot be broken. Elias drew Amelia close. Then our journey is just beginning, he murmured. Amelia rested her head against his shoulder. Yes, she whispered, but as long as we face it together, I fear nothing. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of amber and crimson. The west stretched endlessly before them, wild, untamed, and full of promise. And for the first time, Amelia realized that love under the sacred law was more than destiny, it was courage, sacrifice, and an unshakable bond that could withstand any trial. As they rode into the twilight, hand in hand, the townsfolk of Redridge watched with hope and awe. Amelia and Elias were not just lovers or heroes, they were a living testament to the sacred law, a law that bound hearts, tested courage, and ensured that love could thrive even in the harshest frontier. And in that vast, untamed landscape, they knew one undeniable truth. Whatever the West had in store for them, they would face it together, husband and wife, bound by law, destiny, and the unbreakable power of love. The wind whispered through the prairie grass, carrying with it a promise that the law, their love, and their courage would endure long after the echoes of gunfire faded into legend.